I love my job as an artist. Well, that was lovely. No matter how much I love being here, I've got all the inspiration I need to take back to my studio about a couple of miles away. So let's see what we can create in the studio with all this lovely material that I've got in on my Pink Pig sketching pad. Come on, let's get going. Well, I've just arrived back in my studio and I did produce a quick sketch of the scene, which is that's a little sketch in my sketch pad. And then I decided to pour myself a nice cup of tea before I proceeded to paint this picture. Well, there's my basic mixing setup really. Mixing palette, nicely positioned to the right there. Set of brushes, pencil or two, only need one, and a water jar. Now I'm going to freshen up the colours first, and all you do, I've been painting with these probably when I did the sketch actually, but they're completely dry overnight. So what I'm going to do is to freshen them up just with water and all the varying colours, same sort of colours. I've got cobalt blue, ultramarine blue and Windsor blue red shade. I've also got raw sienna, cadmium yellow, cadmium lemon, that's that one there, and just freshen those up because I like to have a nice bit of fresh colour. Light red, that's another one there, that's very useful. May not use that today, but burnt umber, nice dark brown. Got Indian red, not sure what reds I shall use at this stage. There's alizarin crimson, and of course the good old Payne's grey that's not going to be used I don't think today, but I'll freshen it up. I have another, just a plain lemon yellow there. So they are the main colours all freshened up and ready to go. Well, I'm going to show you the drawing on this one. It's very simple really. We just need to establish where that distance is there, and working from the sketch, do also have a photograph which is handy. Right, then we need to establish the large tree that's going to stand somewhere here. So that's the base of it. Just go up, it sort of like curves in, which is always good. Reasonable trunk. Let's not be too weak with that, too small with that trunk. There we are. And we're going to have, then there is another one here. Now this one actually sits behind and it somehow comes out there. It's always nice to have something different. That's the branch. Now this is where the trunk more or less follows that, but I'm just going to pull it away a little earlier than it actually is, because I do feel that that didn't quite look right for a painting. Sometimes you have to make things look a little bit better than they are in nature, although that's not always easy. But and then we have another one here that sits behind that, and they all seem to slope in. You'll notice in woodlands trees tend to head towards the light, so consequently they tend to slope at certain angles, and that can then go up there. I'm not worrying about the larger branches. There is another tree which is very much darker sitting behind there. Just going to put the trunk in just so as we can, it's sort of like snakes away, that one. Anyway, that's the cluster of more or less 3 trees, although there's 2 there, so it's more like 4, but it looks like 3. And then we have a large tree here. Now that's going in as well, definitely. It needs to sit somewhere here, not too much on the extremes. It's quite a large tree, and it's quite, you don't see a great deal of it because it's stuck up in the amongst all the overhanging branches. Then we have a few bits and bobs in the way of trees there, small little, actually could be hazel, those, it looks the way they're clustered together. And then of course we have a little idea of where they've got the overhanging branches, distance, and we're not going to have a track on this. It's you probably know me as a person that likes to have a track in the scene, but in this case we're not going to have a track. It's just going to be all bluebells. So now let's get started with the painting. Well, the first thing we need to do is to lay some basic washes on. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm using this mop brush again, my old favourite, number 4 De La Rowney. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to damp the paper in this one. You can see where I damped my colours up. You can see the colour of the water, so you can see exactly where I've damped, which is always, which I feel is not a bad thing for you viewers to see that. I'm going to come right the way down to the more or less the what I'd class as the horizon line, really, somewhere there. We will be painting into that shortly, but at this stage we just come straight down to that. That's lovely. There we go. Allow that water to soak in nicely. Just spread that across. That's it. That's all running down all the time. Going to damp up the top a little, just a bit more. It always dries at the extremes quicker and at the top, so that'll help keep that. Now the colours that I'm going to mix for the sky, this is the sky you can actually see behind all the leafing, and there is a lot of crimson there, so I'm going alizarin crimson and actually I'm going to go alizarin crimson. Seems rather strange, but I'll tell you why in a minute when I've thought of a reason. No, what it is, I think there is a lot of the crimson colour within that sky. I mean, overall it is. Now, to that crimson, I'm going to add some blue, cobalt blue. Cobalt blue is as good as any. Just so as we can begin to see a little bit of the blue effect, but basically, and that will mix on the paper, really, keeping it nice and light, really light. Yeah, that's fine. Yep, that pretty much does it for me. Move a little bit of the moisture at the bottom area there, and by doing that, I mean take some moisture off of the brush so that the brush wants to pick up colour, or in this case water. Right, now the next thing we do is to get a feeling of the blurred images of distant leafing. They need to sit back so that the foreground comes forward, and for that I'm going to use cadmium yellow with, I'm going to use cobalt blue again, because that will give me a green that's quite fresh but not as vibrant as some of the greens that I will use later. All mixed greens, and yeah, there we are. Nice sort of, you've got to remember it's springtime, nice springtime greens. That's what we're looking for. And I'm modelling this, I'm leaving some sky because I can see excuse me, lots of sky underneath or through branches. Adding a little more yellow there. There we go. this is the key to this type of painting. Keep it all fresh. Keep those colours fresh. It's so easy to go quite, you know, in watercolour, you know, colours never come up, you know, they never dry out as brilliant as they look when they're wet. So make them more brilliant than you really need. That's my suggestion. Right, okay, now what I'm going to do, there is some land, or, well, there's a field in the distance there. So I'm going to use this colour, a little deeper, because it will dry back, to create a blurred image of that. There's a distant field there. There we go. And I'm just going to splash in a bit of yellow, just to give it a bit of feel. Right, now I'm going to go cadmium yellow with a little of the Windsor blue, just to get a deeper, slightly, just a bit more yellow into that. Change of colour, change of tone, a little darker, while it's still wet. That's it. Got to work fairly quickly here to give the impression of blurred images of branches and what have you. A little bit darker as it comes down, but we'll do that in a second. Right, now we can now go up where the darker areas are, within where the branches overhang. So we put in the lighter area. Now I'm dropping in slightly darker area. Some of it does cross actually, so I may as well show that. It's quite dense there, although we need to leave some patches unpainted. Vital if we are to get the effect we're looking for. There we are. That's good. That's probably enough. Now I'm going to work my way across, adding a bit, mixing a little more colour. It's gradually running out of colour, to the undergrowth there in the far distance beyond the wood itself. That is, it's like a distance of colour beyond the wood. And then here we have one or two individual clumps overhanging, not a lot. So I'm opening that up and just using the point of the brush. Paint over the trees, never paint around trees. Always paint over trees that are going to be darker. If they're lighter in the end result, then yes, you need to paint around them. But in this instance, paint over the top, because they're all going to be darker. All being well. Good. That gives a nice fresh instant glow to that scene. Right, clean the brush thoroughly, because now I'm going to do the bluebells and the greenery, and pull that, see that bead of colour there, that'll be pulled in to that. Right, now my favourite bluebell mix is cobalt blue and alizarin crimson, and I'm going to drop that in along that distance, and that won't look very blue to start with. Just add a bit more blue to that. That's it. There we go. So that's nicely in the distance there. That's it. And I'm going to put patches where I think they will be, where the bluebells will be. So there's a patch of bluebells there, patch of bluebells there, nice and wet. Notice how it's going nice and damp. Got to keep it damp. There we are. And it becomes a stronger blue as I come forward. So that's vital. But you've still got to have some of that other colour in there, some of that Just need plenty of water in this because I want to marry that with, there we are. Now as we come forward it gets a bit, so this is just where the bluebells will be. It's not nice and soft along the back edge there. That's it. Trying to keep that nice and damp. There is some here, but not too many patches. There we are. Right, now we put cadmium yellow with that mix with a little Windsor blue, and all of a sudden we get a green again. Keep it fairly fresh. Don't be too fresh in the distance. So there it's not as fresh as, there we are. Keep it nice and damp, and you can cover over some of the bluebells if you want to get rid of, if you've got too much there. So that's the initial green. Now I'm going to clean the brush. Now I'm going in with cadmium yellow again, Windsor blue, a little bit fresher this time, and this is the areas of green between those bluebells. Behind that tree there, trees will show later. Leave some little patches of white. See where little tiny patches of white, I love those. Then as we get into this foreground area, we add cadmium lemon to that, because that really gives us a lovely fresh lemony green. Not initially noticeable, but it will be once we paint through. There we are, one or two little harder edge forming there. Nice to see. It's beginning to dry out now, so we're getting some harder edges. Just what, and you can soften those harder edges with the damp paint. There we are. And then mainly lemon yellow, cadmium lemon, and the Windsor blue here in the foreground. And can you see the way that we're gradually getting the impression of the greens, all very soft and subtle, you know, but we're getting that impression of bluebells. A bit more blue in here now, just as we come into the foreground, give it a bit of depth. There we are. We can be a bit rougher in the foreground here because we're going to show some colour standing up. Now, the key to this is that we don't look at it too long. So what we've got to do is to just allow that to completely dry. Well, now that's completely dry, which is good. You've got all the base colours down. This is the thing when you produce these sort of subjects, woodland scenes, similar sort of scenes to this, whether it be bluebells or whatever. Get the soft background in first, then start putting the middle, so you've got all the distance and depth within the foreground. So it's between all the bluebells, you know, the blurred in. Then you can put your bluebells and your leafing on top of that. That way you've got depth behind. It's not, it's more two-dimensional rather than just be sky, leaf, branches. You need sky, distant, very distant greenery, very distant leafing, middle distant leafing, and then finally foreground leafing and branches and trunk work. So that's basically principle. Half-inch brush I'm using for this particular demonstration for the leafing. Can use a round. I think I'm okay with this. Right, all we're going to do, we're going to start off putting in some fresh colour, but textured this time. So I'm going to use lemon yellow, little drop of water, not too much, cadmium lemon with Windsor blue. Okay, lay the brush on the side, don't have the brush overloaded, and just stroke and lift. Dot, stroke and lift. Twist the brush. Okay, I'm looking for a little bit of texture. Reload. And where it comes into the light areas, just try and get that. You're looking for an impression of leaf shapes. You're not looking for a individual. If you're looking for individual leaf shapes, you'd be putting this section on just with the point of a brush and trying to indicate individual leafing. But this is textured impressions of leafing. Not everywhere. Always leave some gaps. Change of colour, a bit more blue perhaps there, to give a sort of a feeling of, it's really a feeling of backlight really, by adding more blue, because here you've got a lot of light coming through. Notice I'm turning the brush and pulling and pushing at the brush. It's a technique that I've developed. Don't say as I've seen it anywhere else, but there you go. No doubt there is artists out there that do a similar sort of thing when they're coming down, when they're trying to produce leafing. And here we've got more individual leaf areas. So they're not as such leaf shapes, they're impressions of leaf shapes. It's a vast difference. And don't stop where the trees are. You know, if the branch comes into that, quite likely it carries on at least into in between. There we are. Perfect. And here you've got small. Now these must be quite small because they're very much in the distance. They're a little larger because they're closer. That's a bit, to be a little bit careful here that you don't overdo things. So easy. Notice I turn the brush. That's it. Just dot and dab. Don't do too many. You can always go back and add, but you can't take them away quite as easy. There we are. Keep a little gap in the centre there. One or two of these just go up into the canopy where the rest of the branches are. One, two individual spaces there. Individual ones there. There you go. And I'm just going to put one or two here, so they're probably a little further back. One or two there. So that's basically all you really need to know about this particular passage really. Now as I move down, I'm going to add same two colours, a little darker. I think it's a little darker. Let's see whether it's a little darker. Probably. and it's a little more dense because some of this area is actually growing up from this tree. These, I think they're hazels actually. So it's a little denser, but even so, still gaps. And that then heads out like that. That's it. And similar sort of thing here. You know, you have to really make it up as you go along, really. Use what you see as a basic principle. Just soften that as it goes away. See how I put that on? Then I'll soften it with my finger. So it looks further back than these. That looks further away than that. Quite dark there. Quite dense. But then it gets lighter again as it comes out up the top. And just, there we are, I'm scratching across the paper. I shall use that technique there as well, just to show the blurred images at the top. There we are. When you load the brush, go into the dense area first. Then, as the brush runs out of paint, you can move up to the extremes. And that way, you end up with a variety of colour. Trying to use the same paint on that side. Going to have to remix anyway, so... but lovely, fresh, what I'd class as nice, fresh spring greens. And I would say this time of year, the greens are, this particular year, I mean, the greens are quite fresh and vibrant, which is always pleasing to see. I'm not sure whether it's because we've had quite a mild sort of early spring. That's probably the reason. But and notice how I'm being quite jagged where them bluebells are, because that makes, rather than just having a straight line, you've got lovely bluebells coming up into this clump of greenery, whether it's in the field or whether it's, not quite sure where it is, but you've got to be aware with watercolour where the lighter areas, the shapes you get from the lighter areas will govern the image in that light area. So that's always something that you need to think about. Yep, that's good. Okay. Now I'm going to move on into the more, you know, the distance to start on the ground, but work my way forward. Now to start with, I've got to have a less of an intense green. So what I've done, I've added cobalt blue to lemon yellow, just put a touch of red with it, because that will knock that green, not too much, but it will knock that green back considerably. Not too much there, just be careful. Yeah, if it blobs a bit, just spread it with the finger. Oh, there's a bit of greenery underneath there. Then we've got the bluebells again. Mustn't get rid of the bluebell, the feeling of these lovely bluebells. Just soften it with your finger. There we go. And then the shape of the brush quite often determines the clumps of greenery and over those little white patches. Remember I said about those white patches? That's the key to getting sparkle into your pictures. They really must glow. That's what you're trying to achieve with watercolour. That glow and that sparkle. That there we go. And right, this is the back of that, so we're not going to be too complicated with that. Let's just get rid of that there. That's it. And There's a little bit there. There's a little bit there in the distance. That little bit of green. Good. All going very well at this moment. There we go. Clump of greenery there that stands up into the bluebells, the base of that tree. A bit more water, just a touch. You have to be careful that you don't use too much water, because you don't get that nice feeling of texture. Too much water and you end up with well, you lose texture basically. Don't want to over cover too many of the bluebells areas, because if you do, then you're not notice how I'm softening the undersides, leaving the sparkling top, just trying to soften that center so that it looks up into, so we've got a soft area leading in and then texture each side. It's all a matter of a vision to what you hope the end result would be, which is not always easy to the beginner. In fact, it's far from easy for the more experienced, and I can vouch for that, because it doesn't always work. But now as I come forward, I'm using a bit more cobalt, and I'm going to use cadmium yellow now, just to bring the changes, but put it in with the same mix, because I don't want that to get you know, just a gradual change of colour. You don't want, you know, stark changes of colour, because if you get stark changes, then unfortunately it doesn't go well. Now, see what I've done? Texture on the top. I've left a little, what I'd class as a peaceful area, before I've got texture again. I always have peaceful areas. Textured and peaceful. Too much of a good thing in anything we do in life is not good. So, you know, to save too much of a good thing, just be very, very careful when you paint. There you go. Nice little clump there, paint down into that, and then that can sway through. Not got a great deal of bluebells in this foreground. We can put some added bluebells in. See? Now I'm using lemon yellow again with Windsor blue. Trying to stand up some sort of more foreground textured grasses. Get rid of most of that white there. Too much. Some of these white areas will be removed when we come to add our a little bit of shadow work. I'm not going to put too much shadow work. Now, even more lemon and Windsor blue, and this is quite strong and quite bold, because put one or two of these darker patches here and there, just to give an introduction. It mustn't be all of a sudden go dark, you know. You have to make it look better than the real thing. That's the thing with an artist. We try, you know, and make it look better than it really is. which sometimes it's not easy. There we go. And I think that, for fear of overdoing things, will have to be it for now. Now it's time to look at painting the branches really, but the key to this is where you leave the branches and allow that green to stand forward. So I'll explain that. First thing I'm going to do, it's a mix that's not too strong. It's burnt sienna and cobalt blue. Now we've got a branch coming, a small sort of twig area there, and that goes up there. Something a little stronger, a little bit larger there. Don't want to get too fussed with this. Got to be suggestive. Mustn't be. You see the way I'm leaving gaps? Because that is where you get the feeling of the leafing in front of that. Where it's light, you can put your branches. Here we are. Don't overdo that. Then we have another sort of a one there that goes up into that, and then it almost disappears, and then it's just a branch that heads out like that. That's good. Just make that just a tone darker. There we are. Good. Now we move forward. I'm going to do this little hazel area, and I'm adding a little more burnt sienna for this. Not too much, just so that it's a dull brown in the distance. As you come forward, the browns get a little bit stronger in colour. Right, nice thick hazel branch there, and that goes up. Still see that there. We have another one there. I'm sure they're hazel. That's the way they would grow, I think. That's it. Don't go over all your greens as you go up, otherwise you'll lose the effect of branches in front. You wouldn't have the greenery, then all of a sudden see branches in front of the greenery. You've got to make certain that it plays its part. The greens that you've laid on, you don't overpaint all of those. There we are, nice bit of depth to that. Yeah, it's okay. Now I'm going to put in one or two other little bits and pieces here and there, just to give it, just while I've got this colour on, because there will be some branches in the distance there, little clumps. Oh, and there is some here that are sort of standing up in the distance like that. There we are. So little saplings really. There we are. Gradually building it up very, very nicely. Brighten the light up just a touch. Okay, now as I come forward, a bit more burnt sienna to create this tree here. Now this is quite a large feature, and the good thing about this is I'm going to stand it in bluebells, so where it stands you need a jagged base to indicate there's bluebells at the bottom of the trunk. Then this side I can see all the way up to there, but overhanging is some branches and some leafing, so I leave gaps, just as if there's an overhanging branch. See that? Just as if there's an overhanging branch at the bottom of the overhanging that tree. Then as it goes up, there's a branch that sweeps right the way across, like that, and then we can see the trunk again. Just be aware of the shape of the trunk. Don't make it too wide as you go up. Can always widen it. I will say that. Can't make it can't make it narrow quite as easily. Not to make it look correct anyway. And this has a bit more burnt sienna in there, so that gives it that nice little sort of feeling of warmth, which is what we need. And then we have, see all of this trunk, once it breaks through there, two little touches of, don't want to make it too detailed, but on the other hand, it's nice as a demonstration not to be too loose, you know. It's a fine dividing line sometimes when you're demonstrating. Good. And then of course, can't actually see any, but there would be branches coming away like that. There may be a reasonable branch coming off of that too. Well, I'm putting one in anyway, putting them in where you can see gaps. There we go. Could use a rigger for this, but just about getting away with this, I think. And that sort of comes from that area there. Let's bring that right down to there. Then we can pull a branch out there and to support that leaf shape. Good. Okay. Oh, and we'll put some more in with a rigger shortly. These are the main sort of branches at the moment. Right, now we're going to look at the clump of the clump of trunk work to the left. Now these trees, cluster of 3 or 4 there, have a bit more of a green tint to them. So I've put a little of the green mix that I had on my palette into that. And they stand in front of the background greenery. So we paint up like that. Be 1 or 2 little gaps where there's some leafing overhanging, but not a great deal on this one anyway. And then it comes up there like that, heads through. Let's leave a gap there. Can just about see a gap there. I'm going to put a branch in there. Just feel it needs it. It's gone a little bit narrow too quickly, so I'm just adding a bit more to that. Make it a little bit more substantial. That's it. Don't want to be too narrow too early, but if they do go narrow like that, it looks as if they go away pretty quick, you know, rather than coming towards you if they get wider. There's a gap there, and that's there, and then another one that runs out of picture there. Good. We'll put branches on that again later. Now the next one will have a little bit more brown in there. So the mix I'm using here to give it a green brown and a bit more strength is Windsor Blue, burnt sienna. That'll give quite a nice brown, quite a browny green. That's what I'm looking for, and that's the words I'm looking for too, browny green. And that runs up the side of that one and then breaks out there, so it stands behind that. So that's then going up like that, It's all the same tree, but it stands behind that one at the front. All will be revealed when I paint the one at the front, really. Just make certain that's gives it a bit of width. There you go. And then that's going to finish there, because that's where a branch overhangs. And then it goes up again at a bit of an angle like that. Don't have to follow the pencil work. You know, if it doesn't look right where you did the pencil drawing, just paint it somewhere else. Pencil work can be removed later on, but quite often it's not needed. Then from the base here we have a branch, quite a large branch, that heads out and up in front of that tree like that. There we are. So that sits back, this comes forward. Right, then finally, this is our most important tree, so it will hold the depth of colour, and that's this one here. Just add a bit more blue so it comes up more green. There we go. There'll be too much paint on this. In actual fact, and don't forget to leave a jagged edge where it sits there. In actual fact, they're slightly lighter at that point than that one, so I'm dragging the brush. Hopefully we can see change in colour. We will then be able to see the difference between one tree and the other. Can always go a little darker later if required. There we go. And now add more water. And this one pretty much goes up uninterrupted. Although having said that, I like the idea of that little bit of branching there coming over. Then we go up again and make certain that we hold this line as well. There we are. Let that bleed through, and that needs to be a little wider, in my opinion. There we are. And then we go up into the canopy, a little bit more, the branches showing there. Reload the brush, don't want to run out of paint, otherwise you get hard edges. That was what was happening, so I quickly reloaded before it dried, and then that more or less heads like that out of picture. You can just see it go right the way out at the top. Just reload again. And that is the 3 large trees put in. All I've got to do now, there is one behind there which I'm going to put in. This one is considerably darker, so it's quite a strong mix, this, and a bit more blue, just so it sits back. And all we do, it sort of stands there, it's behind that branch. So that's why that's why I didn't paint it too early, because it's got to stand behind. So we leave out, remember I said about some trees you paint around, some you paint over, depends on their tone. Not making too much of this one. It goes off up into the canopy, gradually getting lost up there. We're going to have a branch that comes out there like that, and it actually cuts across like that. This one goes up there. Well, that's where it's going anyway. And another one there. We will extend that because obviously it's got to go somewhere. You know, once you do one branch one side of the tree, you need to justify that with a branch the other. Okay, now it's the rigger time, just to get the smaller twig areas. Okay, now it's just using the rigger to sort out any sort of branches that are coming in from there. There are some from the background there that nestle in from there. And as the brush runs out of paint, you can sort of use that to your advantage. Reload. Don't want to do too much in the distance there. Don't want to do too much to that really. Perhaps one or two there, one or two coming up there. Just, you know, put enough in to indicate something going on there, but you don't need too many. There we are. Maybe just one or two there like that. Where they come from, not really sure. Not really worried, to be quite honest. I think we can safely say that we don't want to overcrowd that. We don't want to overcrowd that. So let's now concentrate on these branches here that are heading nicely away, supporting the canopy above. Right. Branch from that tree. Doesn't matter if they're a little darker than the tree, just make certain you soften where they meet that. Rather tempted to have a branch coming away there and then just lose that. Not quite so sure that worked with that other branch coming over, so we'll paint it over that. That's okay, that's perfect. Make that just a little darker down that back edge like that. Then we have that coming away there, and then of course there must be something going up there from somewhere. One or two there. That would then extend up to there, and just keep fiddling away at some branches. Don't add too many. I always say you can add more, but you can't take them away. Too little there, just to support, coming out from the woodland and just supporting those branches. Don't have to show them all, just one or two. There you go. Now see how that goes narrow? It's got to widen. Always wider where it meets the trunk. Little straight, put a bit of movement in it. Still have a straight bit, providing you have a bit of movement, and that probably supports that leafing there, although it probably wouldn't because that's in front. So with that in mind, we're going to have to continue beyond that. That's it, because that's well at the back of that. And then we put a few out there. Okay, now we put in the stronger branches in front, the real dark sort of branches, and a lot of the light is really coming from that area there. So I'm going to put in, you know, so a lot of this dark area comes on the back of that. Right, oh, there is a branch that comes away there that's really lovely and dark, to give that punch. And notice I'm going to soften that where it meets the trunk. There we are. Always sort of thing that I tend to do anyway. Just watch it, don't get too thick. It's a little bit of a thick branch there. Justify that. It's a bit thicker there and make that one a little bit thicker. You can get yourself out of trouble. Believe me, I do that all the time. You get into trouble with the look of a branch. You have to just make it look real. No. Right, where else are we going? We do have some sort of jagged old tree that's stuck there like that. That's probably supporting one or two of the leafing that we can see there. Maybe one coming in from the outside, having to put this in imaginary, just to help give a sense of light, really. One or two little spiky areas there. Another one coming in there. Just helps to hold in that left hand side a little, gives a bit of interest, and everything heads towards that distance, that glow in the distance. Good. Now it's just the bluebells. Let's put a bit of texture on these bluebells. Now I'm going to start off in the foreground with these bluebells because the brush is quite damp, and I'm just going to go onto the outside edge. There we go. And I'm using the flat brush, and I've opened the hairs up on the brush, so that way we see these bold sort of spiky bits that you get into those blue areas like that. Just an impression of them. There we go. Oh, there's a lovely little blue patch there. Where there's blue patches, you can even put some into the green areas where they sort of get lost amongst the greenery. And a lovely bit of light there, so I'm using that for the bluebell shape. Just make sure we get that right. Still not sure that's perfectly right. Oh, that's better. Let's just try it there. It's a fine dividing line between getting that brush perfectly shaped. Just soften the undersides. There we go. Now as we go into the wood, you need to get less and less detail. So notice how I'm getting rid of some of the areas with my finger. Just keep dotting around. Once the brush shapes nicely, you'll find that it works quite well. Here we are. Now, for instance, there's a little area there. See where I put a clump of darker? Then underneath I just pull across, and all immediately they sit on the ground. Here we are. And as I go away, getting less and less, till we go right into the distance, you wouldn't see the bluebell heads right the way back. Put a little bit here, pull that through, just suggestion. Some there, but not everywhere, just a few here and there. A little bit there too. That's it, and touch there, but get rid of it very, very quickly before it dries. Well, not get rid of it, but just spread it. Oh, lovely little clump there. I like that. Base of that tree. And that, I think, is probably enough to give that bluebell wood effect. It's just shadows now. Now, for the shadows, I'm going to use alizarin crimson, and lo and behold, ultramarine blue. So I don't want the shadows to be too much the same colour as the bluebells, so that's why I'm using a different blue. Okay, now these mustn't be too dark. That's the key to these shadows now. Just be very, very careful. Now obviously we've got shadows under there. Just sweep those across. A nice subtle shadow. Sweep it across like that. Would be some little shadow areas there. You know, it just a little bit from the overhanging trees there. Gradually picking up a bit of depth. So a little bit here possibly. I think there would be. And it has to be dappled. Like that. Now, a bit weaker. And that sort of flows over there. Runs up the tree. I'll deal with that tree shortly. So in actual fact you are covering some of the lovely textured work that you had, that you put on. But that's how it is when you're painting a woodland scene like this. You know, you're putting these soft, subtle shadows. Don't want too many. A little bit there, 2 little touches there, a little bit under there, particularly under the overhanging greenery, and stand that up. So you've got undergrowth there, just kicking up into that sort of area. That's it. And I'm going to do that at the base here too, just to add a bit of interest. That's it. Good. Okay, and then work your way forward, getting a little bit more bolder with the colour. And the colour you use on the left, you've got to use the same on the right, or vice versa. Now I'm adding more ultramarine now, a little bit more red, to create a swathe of foreground shadow that is always a trademark of mine, because I think it does help immensely to show light. It throws that distance out into sunlight. Without putting this in, you're not going to achieve that sense of light shining through. Just 1 or 2 little spiky grasses coming up there, just hinting at those. There we are. And then 1 tone darker, just there, bottom right hand corner, and that'll just show 1 or 2 little sort of things going on within the grasses. And I'm going to have a little darker there. That's it, and then just soften the underside of that. Using your fingers you can achieve quite nice effects quite often. Here we are. Good. Then with this dark colour, going to give the trees a little bit more strength. Now this one is very much darker down that left hand side, like that, and then it goes slightly lighter, so I just go a smaller damp brush and soften that so it bleeds around and all of a sudden you've got a lovely feel of shape and form to that. Just going to get rid of that. Some of these sections I'm not that happy with. So, and the light is coming more or less from the back there. So that's what I'm trying to depict. I think that's probably achieved that. Then this one, not quite so dark. Take off a bit of paint. This one there again is dark, but it's lighter on the right hand edge. So that then shows up that one. Just soften that as it comes in. And then that goes up there like that and into the canopy. Then we get the damp brush again and just let it bleed through, create a lighter effect on the right hand side, which is where the light's coming from. And of course that would go under there as well to a certain extent. A bit lighter, damper brush. There we are. And then finally possibly this one would hold a bit more darker colour. There. Not going to overdo that though, because I don't want that to interfere with the colours, the greens there. Good. Now it's this stage where you really need just to sit back and wait for everything to dry. Well, there you have it. I think you can see that okay. I don't think you've got too much glare there. All it needs is signing really. And I'm going to sign the bottom left hand corner in very dark paint. That's pretty much dry. One or two damp areas in places, but there we are. And that is my normal signature. So there we have it. Basically we've got the balance, I think just about right, clump of trees there, then this one holding in the right hand side, then we have a small little area of what I'd probably call hazel, then we run away into a soft distance. You just want to walk along those, picking your way between those bluebells into the far distance. So that's the small wood on the outskirts of Chelmsford, where I walked earlier during the week, where I made a simple sketch which I will show you. This is the simple sketch that I made once I got back, so not dissimilar, you know, but I've used that as a base, but I've not obviously made this exactly the same. Then I've produced that rather lovely scene of a bluebell wood here in Gallywood in the heart of Essex in the UK. If you have enjoyed watching, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. There's a link bottom right hand corner, just click on that and you'll be updated on you know, as I upload more videos. Got lots more to come, so stay tuned, keep well, and thank you very much for watching.